Welcome back to the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. I'm Joe Noga, joined by Paul Hoynes. Hoynesy, the Guardians, they're looking up at rock bottom right now. I mean, this is pretty bad. They lose 9-0 in the series opener against the Rays at home at Progressive Field, the first of three on Monday night, and it's the third consecutive shutout loss for this team. They haven't scored in 28 consecutive innings. The offense is bad. The pitching's starting to get there. And right now, the morale is about as low as it could be. We had an incident with Tanner Bibee and Stephen Vogt in the dugout in the fourth inning that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But right now, I want to focus on the futility and the frustration of this offense, which hasn't scored a run since the eighth inning on Friday in Texas. Just what can't even bring to mind the words how badly this team needs to score, and they just can't seem to find a way to do it.
Yeah, Joe, it is. They're going through one of those stretches right now where everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and they're just not. They can't even generate a threat, much less get hit with runners in scoring position. They're not drawing walks. No one is getting on base, and when they do, it's 3 up, 3 down. Just really, they have hit the doldrums. I mean, the dog days have come late in August instead of early in August for the Guardians, and they just look frustrated, Joe. And it's coming at the worst possible time of the season, right out of the wild card race.
Yeah, you look back just 12 days ago, this team was a half game out of a playoff spot for the third wild card, and within 5 games of the division after trailing by as many as 15 games earlier in the year. Just the precipitous fall over these last 4 series. They haven't won a series in their last 4. The matchups have not been favorable in a lot of cases, but again, they're just not finding ways to come through successfully with runners in scoring position when they do get on base, and then they've had situations where the pitching has failed them, and it did so again last night with Tanner Bibee didn't get a lot of help from his defense early on, and that led to some of the frustration later on in the game. But there are situations that are popping up now that you see only from bad teams that don't cover bases when they're supposed to, or the ball doesn't wind up where it's supposed to be. You're not going to beat even, mid-level teams like the Rays right now if you're playing baseball like that.
They have to play near perfect baseball in all phases of the game with this offense to get a win, Joe. And they're just not doing it. Like you said, the pitching has been decent, but at a critical time they give up a big hit. Defensively, they've shown some cracks after really playing pretty good defense for most of the season. They've thrown the ball around a lot, and offensively, it's just been, a void. There's nothing happening here. No one hits home runs. No one hits even doubles. I mean, their last 10 hits have been all singles. It's hard to watch right now. It's bad baseball.
Yeah, and let's give a little credit last night to the Rays, their starter, lefty Ian Seymour, a young guy. I think only has a couple of starts under his belt. He goes 5 innings, only allows 1 hit. The Rays only allow 2 base hits in the game by the Guardians. Brian Rocchio and I believe Gabriel Arias had those hits. I'll ask you this right now: who scores the next run for the Guardians? Do they get a run tonight? Who scores the next run? Who comes across the plate for the Guardians next?
That's a great question, Joe. I'm going to I'll go with Stephen Kwan scoring the next run. But I think he would have scored the last run with the Guardians if they didn't stop him at third, with on Jose's bases loaded double on, what was that, Friday night in Texas?
Friday night, yeah.
Yeah, and and Ruglis Odor, the third base coach, playing it safe, held him up, and he probably should have let him go. They might have won that game.
Yeah, Jose had something to say about that in the dugout afterwards as well. Who hits the next Guardians home run? Jose Ramirez, Kyle Manzardo, Gabriel Arias. Not a lot of options there that give you a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I'm going with Rocchio. I think he's probably their hottest hitter, and he's shown a little pop, so I'll go with Rocchio in that spot.
Will that home run be a solo home run? Because not a lot of Guardians home runs have come with multiple runners on base this year. I think they have one of the highest percentages of solo home runs in the league. So is it a solo home run or a multi-run home run?
It's going to be a solo, Joe. The bases are going to be empty.
Yeah, that's more than likely going to be the case. What Guardians pitcher will give up the next home run for this club? We saw Tanner Bibee give up 2 home runs last night. The Rays hit 3 in total in the game. Parker Messick starts tonight. Will it be Messick? Will it be a reliever who comes on after Messick? Will it be Slade Cecconi on Wednesday afternoon when they play? Cecconi has given up 19 home runs since making his debut back in May. That's tied for the second most in the American League over that stretch.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Ciccone, Joe. I mean, he always seems to give, he's pitched well. I really like the way he pitched last time out, but he gave up a couple home runs late and ended up hurting them. He's that guy that, is cruising along and all of a sudden, leaves a pitch over the middle and it hurts him.
Yeah, but in most cases, it's a solo home run for Cecconi, or it
Yeah.
has been in the past this season. So, will Jose Ramirez get to 30-30? He needs 4 more home runs to get to 30. The way he's going right now, I think that might be a struggle.
Yeah, I think he will, Joe. I think he'll come out of this. We've seen him come out of these things before. They've got 32 games left, I believe. So I think he's got a shot. This would be his third 30-30 season, maybe second in a row.
Mhm.
That's something, but right now he looks tired to me, Joe. He looks like he's overcompensating for the rest of the offense.
Yeah, it's a struggle. I think he's trying to do a little too much. And when Hosey's at his best, he's like Stephen Vogt says, he's taking what the pitchers give him, and he's really hunting pitches that he can drive. And we really haven't seen a lot of that. He's just trying to do too much at the plate right now. Needs 4 more home runs to get 30-30. He needs I believe, 5 more steals, 6 more to set a new career high. Last season, he stole 41 bases. Right now, he's at 36. Still among the league leaders in steals, but you have to get on base in order to steal bases, and Jose hasn't been on base a lot in the last 6 or 7 games. Does Jose Ramirez set a new career high in steals by the end of this year?
I'm going to go no, Joe. I think I think he's going to dial it back a little bit when it comes to stolen bases. I don't know if he's the kind of guy. I don't think he steals just to steal. I think he steals when it counts, and they just haven't been in enough games to run that total up. And like you said, he hasn't been on base.
Yeah, when the Guardians need a base, when they need a runner in scoring position to sort of maybe flip an inning, even with 2 outs, he always seems to be the guy to do that. But again, you have to be on base for that to happen, and it's not been the case so far this in this stretch. I want to talk about Junior Caminero. Caminero, a 16-year-old signee back in 2019 by the Guardians out of the Dominican Republic. Came up through the Dominican Academy, was, not necessarily a huge prospect on the radar at the time that they traded him in 2021 to Tampa Bay. Again, this is a trade that gets brought up a lot recently, and sort of talking to Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff. We talked in the one postseason about they have a board that they list all their trades in their offices, that, good trades and bad trades, ones they wish they could have back, ones they wish that, they would have pulled the trigger on. I got to believe Junior Caminero is right up at the top of the list of bad trades that they know was a bad trade at this point.
Yeah, Joe. I mean, it's getting driven home to him this year, on a lot of different fronts. But I remember talking to Chris Antonetti winter meetings ago, and we were going over certain trades, and he goes, "That's just a bad trade." They blew it. They blew it with this kid, and it cautions you never trade with the Rays. I mean, somebody had a great line on this guy, and it wasn't like, they missed either. I mean, he didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, if you look at his minor league numbers, they were good. He was maybe the top prospect in baseball a couple years ago. We're one of the top prospects. I mean, this guy is just what the Guardians need. He's a big, strong, right-handed hitter who makes contact and drives the ball out of the park. And we were talking about this before the podcast. Who does he remind you of, Joe? Who was the last guy the Guardians had that resembled this?
Well, he hit 2 home runs last night, home runs number 38 and 39, and that got me thinking, and I went to look up the last time Cleveland had a right-handed hitter hit at least 39 home runs in a season. One of your favorites, Manny Ramirez, back in 1999. It's been that long since a right-handed Cleveland hitter has hit 39 home runs in a season. Manny had 44 that season. Edwin Encarnacion had 38 in 2017 for Cleveland. But again, it's been that long since they've had at least 39 home runs from a right-handed slugger. And yeah, with every home run that Junior Caminero hits for the Rays this year, it just piles on the misery for Chris Antonetti, Mike Chernoff, and really for Guardians fans who look over there and say, this is a kid who, they had in their system. They identified him as a 16-year-old and brought him in and he missed a year to COVID back in 2020, but he was in that pipeline, in that system, and could have been the guy that really would have made this lineup look a lot different if he had found a way up to be with Cleveland. But like you said, don't trade with Tampa Bay. Kyle Manzardo's in the lineup because they traded with
Yeah.
Tampa Bay, and they sure look pretty good coming out of that trade, sending Aaron Savali to the Rays. The Rays, of course, not coming through in the playoffs in 2023 with Savali, but now he's sort of fallen off. We saw him most recently with Chicago, and the Guardians beat up on him there at the White Sox. They kind of made up for it with the Manzardo trade, but he's got a long way to go to get to 39 home runs.
And Manzo's still got some ground to make up, but he looks like a solid player. Manzardo, Joe, I think he's just getting better, and we're just seeing kind of the tip of the iceberg, hopefully, with Manzo. But Caminero is the one that got away, Joe, and depending on what he does in the next 3, 4, 5 years, that's a dagger to the heart, like you were saying. That's not going away.
Young and a foundational piece for that Rays organization. All right, so we got to talk about the elephant in the room, the 500-pound gorilla, the incident last night with Tanner Bibee. Look, I understand that Tanner Bibee is a guy who is fueled by emotion. He wears his heart on his sleeve on the mound. Coming off the mound, he's fiery, he's competitive. Stephen Vogt says he's one of the most competitive individuals he's ever been around, and you want that in your number one pitcher. You want that in your ace guy. The problem is when the other guys around you don't play up to whatever standard that you have set in your mind, or plays don't get made, and you allow that emotion to sort of show through and maybe show up your teammates, that's where the manager has to step in, and that's exactly what happened yesterday. We'll go back and explain that fourth inning first, and then we'll explain sort of what happened and compare it to some instances in the past that we've seen with this club and how those were handled. So Bibee in the fourth inning, there's a little confusion with Caminero on first base, what the count is. The way that Bo Naylor explained it to us afterwards was Hunter Fiducia, the guy at the plate, the first pitch to Fiducia was a strike, but Todd Titchener, the home plate umpire, didn't say anything or stop the game when the scoreboard put it up as ball one. So the count was 0-1. The scoreboard showed 1-0. The at-bat goes on. It gets to, on the scoreboard, it gets to 3-2. The count's actually, 2-2. Caminero takes off for second base. Nobody moves on the infield because the pitch was ball four in their minds. Bo Naylor jumps up to throw down. Nobody's covering the base. He doesn't throw. Caminero basically walks into second base with the free stolen base. 2 pitches later, Bibee bounces a pitch in that gets away from Naylor. Caminero takes off for third base. Naylor throws down to third. Hosey looks like he's late covering the base. The ball goes into left field, and Caminero comes around to score the first run of the game. Bibee comes off the field. Cameras pick him up as he's going into the dugout, screaming. I'm sure there were some colorful words in there, but what the gist of it was he was telling his teammates, we got to wake up. We got to, get our heads out of our rear ends, that kind of thing. And he's coming into the dugout. Vogt follows behind him immediately. You can see he's got a really stern look on his face, and he exchanges words with Bibee. and then the two of them go up the tunnel from there. We've not seen something like that out of Tanner Bibee, showing up as teammates in that way. And how do you think Stephen Vogt handled the situation in the immediate sort of scenario there?
Yeah, I thought Vogt handled it well. You know, you've got to you don't want your star pitcher showing up the rest of the ball club if that's what was the point. And in a way, Joe, I was glad to see Bibee do it. You know, somebody should say something with this club. It seems like everything is so even keel here. You know, this is not the time to be even keel. This is a time for some emotion. Bibee showed it, and I thought Vogt responded the way a manager should. He said, "Take it down the tunnel. Let's get this straightened out." And the problem is, I'm sure there's like 24 other guys saying, well, who's he talking to? Is he talking to me? And, so that's something, that probably has to get settled in a team meeting or something. You got to, get that aired out if they feel that's necessary. But as, just from the outside looking in, I thought that was a good thing to happen. I thought that was something that needed to happen because this club looks dead in the water. It's looked that way, for the last 10 games. And it's just too streaky for me, Joe, just from that 10-game losing streak, then to the good stretch. Now we're back again to, another stretch where nothing is happening. Somebody's got to do something. In the old days, that Pat Corrales was still managing the club, and they had the spread in the middle of the locker room after the game. He dumped the spread, start screaming, and maybe something would happen. But baseball's an emotional game, and sometimes that emotion has to creep up. It has to break out.
Yeah, one of the things that I did after I went back and I watched that video clip of Bibee basically walking through the dugout screaming, I was looking at his teammates in the background, the players and the coaches that he was passing by. I saw Jose Ramirez give him sort of a side-eyed look, hey, what's going on here? I saw Bo Naylor in the background, basically looking at it saying, are you talking about me? Sandy Alomar's reaction was pretty obvious on his face to, hey, that's not something we do here. But, should it be something that we do here? Should it be, could you imagine 95 Cleveland Indians team? That's a team that had an incident like that. It seemed like, maybe once a week. You covered that team. You were around these guys. There's Albert Bell. If a play didn't get made and Albert Bell thought you were, not pulling your weight, I'm sure he didn't hesitate to say something or do something like that. And that team went to the World Series.
Yeah, it kind of different era, different teams, different personalities. But yeah, things would get said, and I'm sure things have been said in this locker room. The thing that surprised me, Joe, we haven't seen Vogt act like that. Vogt has
Mhm.
always been kind of a steady guy, but he reacted right away and you could see that kind of the former catcher coming out in him a little bit. So he went right after Bibee to straighten the thing out. But yeah, that 95 team, Joe, people, I think you kind of minded your P's and Q's. You tried to do everything right because you knew that there was there was a lot of veterans on that team that would set you right if you got out of line.
Yeah, and you didn't mess with the thermostat in the clubhouse. I mean, that's the kind of thing that Albert Bell would take care of. Yeah, you mentioned the former catcher in Vogt. I mean, he did look like a catcher walking out to the mound, walking after Bibee there to sort of get him in line. It was funny because we asked Vogt, what'd you say to him in the tunnel or anything like that? And he said, no, after I said my piece about, hey, we're not doing it right now. He said, I didn't talk to him for the rest of the game. And then they had their conversation after the game in his office, and they chatted and hashed it out, is what he told us afterwards. Now, a lot of the response that we've seen from fans is, hey, it looks like, Vogt jumping on another grenade for this team, sort of, putting his face out there to sort of shield and protect his players when basically they screwed up. Because Bibee admitted, I screwed up. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have acted like that in front of the cameras, in front of where people were going to see it. But again, like you said, this team needs somebody to flip a table. This team needs somebody to beat up a water cooler. I go back to the movie Moneyball. I always go back to the movie Moneyball. Why do I do that? And Brad Pitt as Billy Bean going into the clubhouse after a win and they're dancing and playing music, or after a loss and they're dancing and playing music. and he takes a bat and beats up the stereo and flips the table over, and he says, "You hear that? That's the sound of losing. That's the sound of losing is what's going on with this club right now." We walk into the clubhouse after the game, and there's no music playing, and there hasn't been for a while. Just does this team need some sort of watershed moment to sort of snap them out of it?
Yeah, I think definitely, Joe. I mean, and maybe this is it. Maybe it's the start of something. I would not be surprised if they have a team meeting, but they never say anything about those. Vogt doesn't say much about team meetings. He doesn't like team meetings, I don't think. But something has to be said. Some guys, the kind of older guys on this team, there's not that many, but some guys have to step up and say something and try to get this team refocused, and start to play good baseball again. Because if not, it's going to be it's going to be an ugly last or 5 or 6 weeks of the season.
Who is that guy? Is Carlos Santana that guy? We know he's got it in him. We've heard the stories about Carlos Santana in Philadelphia when they were playing video games in the clubhouse, and he went in and allegedly smashed up a video game system because he wasn't happy about that when the club was losing. Is Carlos Santana the veteran guy that does this?
Yeah, Santana could be, Hedges could be, David Fry, I mean, it seems like one of those guys to me, Joe, would kind of, step up and say something. Maybe Ramirez, but I don't know if Ramirez is that kind of guy. I don't know if he will or he wouldn't. I've never seen that side of Jose.
Not the first time we've seen incidents where either a pitcher or a player gets shown up and there's a little bit of an outburst. I mean, you and I were talking here. Go back to the 2019 season. As recently as that, Francisco Lindor and Leonis Martin. A guy that had his own issues. Medical issues and those kinds of things. But a play didn't get made in center field that Lindor thought Martin should have made, and the two of them had an exchange in the dugout that was caught on camera.
Yeah, that was in Texas, playing the Rangers, and there was a confrontation in the dugout. And I remember watching Terry Francona. The game was going on while it was happening, and Francona never even turned around, and it was happening right in back of him. I think Sandy and a couple people stepped in there to break it up. Maybe Augie, Augusta
Rivera. Yeah.
Rivero broke it up. It continued. So there was some words exchanged, and then 2 days later, Leonis was designated for assignment. So at that point of the Guardians regime, or that point of the season, you did not mess with Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, no, that was sort of the unquestioned leadership, moment there for Lindor. The other incident that comes to mind, that same season in Kansas City, I was there on a Sunday afternoon when Trevor Bauer decided to launch the ball over the center field wall, sort of a much talked about moment. Technically, Bauer's last pitch for the for Cleveland's organization. As I remember watching Oscar Mercado staring at the scoreboard and flinching when he realized the ball was being thrown over his head. He said he thought the game had started back up and he wasn't paying attention. But the moment after that, when Terry Francona went out to take take Bauer out of the game, Bauer realized how badly he had screwed up and tried to make peace with Tito on the mound. And Tito said, "Get your rear end up the tunnel. I'll talk to you there." It cost Tito a popped blood vessel in his eye because he screamed at him so hard that the next day we're looking at him. He's got a blood vessel popped in his eye. That was one of the more surreal moments when we saw something like that.
How loud do you have to scream at somebody to pop a blood vessel in your eye, Joe? I mean, that's some serious.
Yeah, I've only ever seen Tito angry like that maybe one other time, and that was in Houston when he didn't like a question that was asked in a post games. Yeah, these incidents aren't very frequent, and certainly haven't happened under Stephen Vogt's sort of tenure with the Guardians, but it's something we need to see. Stephen Vogt came to Cleveland as a motivational, an inspirational guy, a guy who, is known for his personality and his emotions. We really haven't seen that since he's been in manager mode. We haven't seen the guy who dresses up as a referee and gets his teammates laughing, or, sings, Disney songs, or any of that kind of stuff. he's been sort of more buttoned up and managerial, I think, in his 2 years in Cleveland. Does Stephen Vogt need to sort of, let out Stephen Vogt?
Yeah, I don't know, Joe. I think a manager, you've got to be who you are. If it hasn't come out by now, it's probably not going to come out. As a manager, I'm sure he felt he had to change gears a little bit as a player, as opposed to being a player. But I thought he did what he should have done last night with Bibee. I thought he addressed it, and I think, he is. All managers have to take kind of get they're in the front of the line and they've got to take the slings and arrows, and he's done a really good job at that. He's got to say the right things. He's got to try to motivate his ball club. He's got to try to be the lightning rod until he's not, and that's part of the job.
Yeah, and it's part of our job to ask the questions. So that's exactly what we're doing here is asking the questions, and I think he's pretty much answered them throughout. So, all right, Hoynesy, that's going to wrap up today's edition of the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. A lot to chew on here. We'll be back with another edition on Thursday because there's an early game tomorrow on Wednesday, and we'll hopefully recap. Somebody scoring for the Guardians and getting a run on the board at some point. We'll look forward to it then.
All right, Joe.